Oh no. Oh no. I'm sorry, Twitch. Give me a minute here. Wow. I know. That's really unfortunate. I'm just having issues. Technical issues with my highfalutin setup. Morning. Wait. Huh? Good morning. Good evening, everybody. Hi. I'm back again. Barely. I told you I'd be late on YouTube. I'm sorry, Twitch. I was trying to look for a way to post to say that I was gonna be late tonight. I couldn't figure that one out. I'm sorry. I'm gonna work on it. I knew I wasn't gonna be able to have the I knew I was gonna be late tonight, and I guess I could have changed the schedule for today, but the schedule is already not accurate. So anyway, here I am. I'm gonna be moving a little bit slower for the next couple of weeks just because for those of you who don't know already, uh I've had some surgery, so I'm just a little bit more tired right now. Um, and also, just for those of you who are also just tuning in, um, yeah, I'm currently reading my dad's novels. I'm reading them one at a time, and I'm doing live edits. So you'll hear me pause and whatnot as I am marking up the paper manuscript because that's the way I roll. I'm using this as a method of editing as well, so you can kind of get an idea of how the story sounds, and in the end, I can also play it back to myself, so that's also handy. But also, I also uh, the stories are really things that I know that he would have liked to have had read aloud for the most part. Many of them, not all of them. Some of them, yeah. Some, but this one, yes, definitely. So I am reading them. I appreciate everybody who's tuning in and who's watching the replays and everything like that. I really much appreciate it. Um, yeah, and I had started last week and had gotten up to chapter 5. This week, we're going to be doing another. Well, here's the funny thing. So, we get to a weird place in the story later on this week. I'll tell you about it as we come to it, but we're missing a chapter. And I'm going to try and see if it'd be kind of nice to have feedback from you guys as to whether or not it reads okay without the chapter, or if I should insert the missing chapter, try and recreate the missing chapter. I believe because I had to do a little bit of reading ahead because when I was like printing everything out for the week, because I print out basically, I read 5 nights a week. So then I was printing out went to go print out 5 chapters, and lo and behold, I'm like, I'm missing a chapter, specifically the chapter for Friday. So here's the thing: is that I I didn't read, but I like read the last paragraph of chapter 9 and the first paragraph of chapter 11. They sort of like they sort of match up. Um, I need to do more reading, so I'm going to find out this week as I'm reading to you guys whether or not we can kind of just let it leave that chapter out, or if it'd be more interesting to have the chapter in. If it have the chapter in, I think that chapter is very, very action packed. I think it will be a bunch of fight scenes, that sort of thing. But we'll get to it when we get to it. Um, and we'll get to it together because as I'm reading this week, I'll be making notes, and I think these next few chapters will help me get an idea as to whether or not to whether or not to insert a new chapter or just to leave it as is. And I'll also get your guys's want to get your guys's feedback. So, just feel free to throw something into the chat. Yes, it is for subscribers, so only for YouTube. Um, it's you only have to be there for 5 minutes. It's just because otherwise I don't really want to have a bunch of spam. For Twitch, I won't be able to answer you guys right away. I'm really sorry. Um, because I can try. I can but try. You know what? That's a lie. What I'll do is I will try and get everything set up. I can't do it right now because tonight I didn't set it up correctly. Working on it. But I have an idea of how to get it set up properly for next time, and we'll get that going. So, without further ado, we're going to launch into chapter 6. For those of you who missed the other chapters, they are available on for replay. And I highly recommend that you listen to those first because right now we're good. I mean, depending on how many chapters you're considering are in the story, we're about a quarter of the way through. So, without further ado, chapter 6 of Trollhunters. You're a fool, you know. The merchant Lavinois, Lavin, nope, Lavinois, sure, knew he tended to be shrill when he was scolding, but it's impossible for him to control it in this instance. You're a fool! Not only could you not prevent a mere girl from making her escape, but she took your sword with her. And now I have this? He held up a piece of paper in his hand. Do you know what this is? No, of course you do not know. You're too much of a fool to know anything. You probably think it's an order for 50 mules, though you know very well that my business has nothing to do with livestock. He slapped the paper down on He slapped the paper down on his desk with a smack. I tell you, fool, what it is. I'll tell you, fool, what it is. It's a request to me from the honorable merchant Nichildus, requiring me not only to pay back the money for my daughter, whom your incompetence lost, but to pay me a further price for his embarrassment. Now, if I should take this out of your wages, you would be working for me for free for the next 100 years. What do you say to that, fool? The guard who'd been in the merchant's service long enough knew better than to say anything. Yes, you might very well stand silent. No, you shall not escape so easily. You shall continue to work for me, but there was a tap at the door. Then the door opened before he could say anything. He turned to roar at his chief servant, but behind him he saw soldiers wearing the king's uniform. Sir, these men have come to request you go with them. A member of the king's court wishes to speak to you. What? What does a member of the king's court wish with me? The officer commanding the soldier said, all I know is that I was ordered to come and invite you to accompany me. Now, will you come along? Lavinoa, who could hear the unspoken message. He might come along willingly or be dragged. Of course I will come along. Come willingly would stand to his credit, no matter what the problem might be. And some of his dealings had not been entirely within the law. He could see no real reason for any member of the Hemorder's court to interest himself in those dealings. The merchant was worried. Gatras fee noted this with some satisfaction. A worried merchant would be more willing to make a good bargain. He surveyed the merchant. Lavinoa was a skinny man with something of a pot belly and receding hairline. Okay, we have some work to do. I mean, he could be skinny and then have a pot belly. That is possible. I now feel the need to draw this, but that'll be a later thing. His hair was tied back neatly with a golden fillet. and he wore a red tunic and green trousers. Clothing intended to make him look jaunty, but succeeded only in making him look foolish. You have a daughter of approximately 18 years of age? Well, that is, I mean, do you have a daughter or do you not? Gattersby spoke sharply, with a pres- presentiment that things might not be as simple as he had wished. Lord, she deserted my household in the middle of the night, cost me a good deal in restitution to be paid to her prospective groom, not to mention other expenses. All the costs, the dresses, the jewelry, so that she could make a good impression. And of course the guards, stopped abruptly, looking at the wizard's face. Your daughter no longer lives with you? It came up somewhere sharply than Gatter's fee had intended. Lord, I do not know what she may have done, but she is no longer my daughter. Something might be retrieved out of this mess. So she left your household here in Muth- Muthakawan? No, Lord, we were in Finitich. Finich. She was to go to the house of Gatter's fee held up his hand. Enough. But I tell you this, if she should return to her household, it could be very profitable for you to let me know. Yes, Lord, indeed, Lord. And who ought I ask, who ought I ask to ask for? You can ask for Gatra's fee and say that it is in regard to the special treat for the king. That will get you directly to me. Deal well and honestly with me in this case, merchant, and you'll make a good friend. The merchant was about to say something else, but Gatra's fee stopped him with a glance. The soldiers will see you safely home. After the merchant had gone out, Gatra's fee clenched his teeth to prevent himself from cursing. It was altogether too easy for a magician to do something very serious. After the merchant had gone out, sorry, I'm just going to backtrack a bit here. After the merchant had gone out, Gatra's fee clenched his teeth to prevent himself from cursing. It was altogether too easy for a magician to do something very serious, even unintentionally. That wizard might be well put to a great deal of trouble cleaning up after such unintended disasters, and it was certain that Gatra's fee had little time to waste on such things. It was ironic that the girl was in Finich, the very target of their operations, but he must begin thinking of ways to have her abducted and brought out there. And he must think of new reasons to give the king as to why the whole thing, the whole proceeding was not going as quickly as possible. And we have angry cats in the background. That is just the thing. Cats who are very angry because they don't like me streaming. Catra's fee looked at the king's guards, then looked again. Among them were a brightly uniformed detachment of sashto men, the tubes of their sashtos peering up over their shoulders. The king caught his glance. You disapprove of my guards? That is not for me to say, Highness. Ha! You think I am a fool? The sashto is a battlefield weapon, no good for hand-to-hand no good for hand-to-hand fighting. But you need not fear. I have made sure that this lot are good with the swords they wear. Katrasvi was not about to question the king too closely. It seemed clear to him, though, that the leaders of the Sashto contingents had requested the honor of supplying detachments for the king's guards. An interesting piece of political information, but not what he'd come to talk about. There is no good news yet, then? I can tell by the look on your face, magician. King Behamor was wearing brown again. Was wearing brown again, Gatras noted. Best not to fool around with him in this sort of mood. I wish I had a better truth to tell you, Lord King. We are coming closer, but we have not yet found the woman we seek. We have found one woman who fits all the criteria, but we have yet to track her down. The king glared at him. You do realize that there are some among your colleagues who have other suggestions for me? Ones that might not cost me quite so highly in gold or time? It will always be as the king wishes. Indeed it will, and there will come a day when I cease to be amused with the time and gold you are wasting for me. Now, go on now and get yourself out of here, and preferably do not come back until you're thoroughly prepared to work your work. Yes, Lord King. Gatras managed to leave the king's presence before it began shivering. It was fall in Mothakowen, and the market was still teeming. As the months wore on to midwinter, it would be less and less. There would be less and less for sale there, and things would begin to slow down. In spring, the first caravans headed up by greedy or desperate merchants would begin coming in, presaging the midsummer hordes. Darazua and Kamutran wandered through the market, looking but not buying. They'd gotten half of their final pay from the merchant, with a promise of the other half in a week's time. The merchant had since disappeared, though he had apparently not left the city. Kamutran was not particularly worried. Look, our pay will put us up in one of the less sleazy towns, probably until spring. Then we will look for other work? Yes, or perhaps, to be on the safe side, we go looking about midwinter. While we still got money to be a little picky about who we work for? He gave her an amused look. Did you learn that in your father's house? She shrugged slightly. You sell your wares when you can get a good price, and you don't wait until you have to sell out quickly just to meet your own bills. There are a lot of young people with swords who can't seem to think that far ahead. Let's go out and look over the market. So here they were. So there they were, wandering through the market of Mithaqoan. Daruzhua, Darahua's sword work had become adequate during the long trip down from Finich. She had become moderately good with the sling, which she carried in a pouch at her belt, along with several lead balls and half a dozen fair-shaped stones, not stories. Oh boy. She glanced across the market where a merchant was supervising the display of bolts of fabric. Atthug and Reyes, her father. A well-dressed woman at the stall was between them, so she couldn't see them properly. She squinted her eyes for a better look. The woman moved slightly, and Durazhua caught a full view of the merchant. It was him. At that moment, she looked up at the woman at the front of the stall, then across. He looked up at the woman at the front of the stall, then across at Durazhua. She could see his face crinkling as he tried to think why she might be familiar. Of course, he didn't quite recognize her dressed as a young man. Then he dropped the bolt of cloth and was shouldering his way through the crowded market toward her. She heard her name being called above the noise of the marketplace. Kamitran, we have to get out of here. Now. She started running, but the older warrior's hand took her shoulder and held her back. Running in the marketplace is a good way to be taken for a thief. Walk. Walk quickly, but walk. She pulled out her leather cap and put it on, tucking as much of her hair up under it as possible. It would not hide her completely, but it might help a little. Then her father's voice was bawling behind them. Darazhua! Stop those two! 2 silvers for whoever brings me those two. Atthug races, all the bright blue blades, muttered not Kamutran. Now we run. She saw him half turn and tip over a fruit stall, sending cantaloupes and melons rolling onto the street, bringing the fruit seller to his feet, shrieking in some strange dialect. People were milling about them, then, looking at the damage, snatching fruit and generally getting in the way. Despite the confusion, someone dropped a hand on her shoulder, shouting, I've got him! Kamitruan's tutelage paid off. She spun, bringing her hand up to break the grip, then kicked the man in the shin. Shins are one of the most tender parts you can reach easily. If he's not wearing shin guards, give him a kick. Even as the man was shrieking curses on her in bastard saga, she followed Kamutran. Someone snatched at him, and the old warrior bellowed, Not me, you fool! Those two over there! He pointed vaguely ahead of them, and people turned in that direction. They pushed their way through the confusion, people shouting in several different languages and imploring 100 different gods, mules braying, chickens squawking, dogs barking, and the like. Kamutran's ruse had not fooled everyone by any means, and there were even some people brave enough to lay hands on armed warriors. Don't use your sword, the older warrior growled. The watch will be here soon enough. Let's just get out of here. She was lighter than he, so she went along in his wake, knocking aside, grasping hands, striking a quick blow here and there. She trusted his lead, not readily understanding where he was going until suddenly he ducked in an alley and pulled her in too. It was barely wide enough for the two to come in side by side. He swung her in behind him. She recovered her balance and saw him knock one man down and pick up another and toss him into the crowd at the alley's mouth. While the crowd struggled to get in, he turned to her and said, Come on! They went around the corner where the alley met the next street, continuing to run, where they ducked down another alley. Over one street further where Kamutran ordered, Walk, now! As casually as they could, they walked along the street to a rather sleazy inn. There was still noise from the marketplace, but it was far away now. They sat at a table, and Kamutran ordered ale for the two of them. A place like this, he muttered. You're less conspicuous, dead drunk, than you are not drinking. After each had taken a sip of ale, he looked at her in the face. Now then, girl, you can tell me what this is all about. It's about suddenly she realized how he had addressed her. You guessed? He shook his head. Anyone who looked at you moving would have guessed if they thought about it. I took pains to teach you how to move in the sword drill so as to make matters less clear, but I only had limited time to work at it. You didn't ask me before why I was in disguise? He shook his head. Call it curiosity. First, I wondered how determined you were to go through with it. But when you took everything I gave you, worked as hard as I demanded without complaint, I suspected there was something behind you that was more objectionable than a lot of sweat and a few bruises. So now I think I have to know more. Did you lie when you said nobody was seeking your life? Well, in a way, they might be. She hesitated for a moment as she thought about how to tell him. I knew from an early age that my father only saw me as a thing to be made use of. First, I was his companion on caravan trips. I knew he would eventually marry me off to someone in exchange for something, a trade partnership, or perhaps just cash. I hadn't liked the idea from the time I came to understand what my situation was, but there was always some possibility that I'd be wed to someone who would allow me some sort of life of my own. But then my father sold me to old Nichildus for cash and a share in a particular venture. Do you know Nichildus' reputation? Three wives in 5 years, all of them very young women. They looked fancy enough in public, but for some reason, they didn't last long. And there were rumors about his treatment of them. That toward the end of each marriage, he would demand more and more, become more and more depraved until the girl ended up dead. Father insisted that these were all just stories spread by nasty gossips, and I shouldn't listen to them. So the night before I was to go to Nichildus, I escaped. She told the tale about climbing down from the window and dealing with the guard and stealing his weapons. He grinned at that. She finished at the sight of her father in the marketplace that afternoon. And that's it, Camuchon. I'd have thought my father would have written me off, cast me out of the family on account of the embarrassment and expense I caused him. But when he saw me here in the marketplace, he came after me. I have a feeling he thinks he can perhaps renegotiate the old bargain, even if he has to deliver me in chains. Wow, but you're a better fighter than most merchants. It won't just be him going around the city to look for me for me from today on. And they'll discover I'm dressed and armored as a warrior, keeping company with another warrior. And when he actually sends people to get me, that'll be taken into account. So, you know where he lives here. The two of us could go in some dark night and kill him. She considered that for a bit, and then shook her head. Hunting him down and murdering him seems just a little too much for me. I just want him to leave me alone. Camutrand tapped an idle forefinger on the tabletop. Myself, I think you've got too many scruples. But perhaps you're right, for the wrong reasons. If we murder him, well, he's a wealthy merchant of the city, and there'd be no end of fuss and bother. All it would take would be a little bad luck, one or the other of us seen in the wrong place at the wrong time, and we'd have the whole might of the city down on us. So, what do we do? I think I ought to go back to Finich. There's no need for you to come along. There isn't? You think you can make it back there by yourself at this time of year? She shook her head. It's my problem. There's no need for you to get mixed up in it. I'm mixed up in it already. Suppose I do stay around when your father's people come asking questions. Someone is sure to tell them that the two of us have been hanging around together. And nobody will believe that I let you head off to finish alone. So I'd be in for a rough time of it. She frowned down at the table for a long time, wondering about this man's motives. He'd admitted that he'd known she was a woman. What was he after? She looked back up at him. I don't know any better way to say this than to say it. I ran off from my father because he was selling me to the highest bidder. If you're expecting me to reward you somehow for coming along, I have to tell you, you're wasting your time. I haven't asked for any reward so far, have I? There's a little anger in his voice. She held up a placating hand and smiled tentatively. I apologize. All I know of men is my father, and some rumors and overheard conversations by his caravan guards. And you must remember that up until a few minutes ago, I was under the impression you thought I was a man. Knowing that you'd seen through my masquerade, I could only suspect that you had a special price for your help. No! His fists clenched and relaxed. Listen, I had a sister. Our family lived in one of the border villages, and when I was young and foolish enough, I signed up for service in the Gizraji army. Unlike a lot of others, I survived the war and eventually mustered about mustered out and went home. In the meantime, there'd been trouble on the border. I never heard about it, of course, having basic sorry. In the meantime, there'd been trouble on the border. I'd never heard about it, of course, having been busy fighting went away across the kingdom. But when I got home, the village was still being rebuilt by the survivors. My mother and two brothers were among the survivors. My father, another brother, and my sister were not. And you've been going around since, helping young women in payment for help that you couldn't give your sister? He came out much more snide than she'd intended. He shook his head. No, not quite that. Just that I try not to walk away from women in trouble. You'd be very popular with the other mercenaries when, say, you just assaulted a town. He grimaced, seeming to look past her at some memory written on the inn wall behind her. Trouble with you, girl. You understand too much about some things. I served as a mercenary in 2 other campaigns until we sacked a town. He shook his head. Not thug and racist and all the spotted sparrows of the woods. 2 men grabbed me before I could kill someone. Someone clubbed me over the head. When I came to, I found I'd been lucky. Nobody bothered to strip me or put a dagger through me. I guess you could say I deserted. Since then, I've been doing guard jobs, caravans, bodyguards, and the like. He was quiet for a bit. She couldn't find anything else to say either.
macOS contains a built-in screen reader called VoiceOver. If you know how to use VoiceOver, press Command F5 now to turn it on and set up your Mac. If you would like to learn how to use VoiceOver to set up your Mac, press the Escape key.
No. I just accidentally activated Siri. I didn't know I could do that. So just bear with me on that one. Oh, good times. No one else could say anything either. And neither could. Oh boy. He smiled. Well, you're right about one thing. We can't stay here in Mithaquen. Your father's more likely to have people coming looking for us. Mind you, it'd be tough going anywhere at this time of year. There are places where a horse can bog down belly deep when the roads are wet, not to mention the problem of bandits. Bandits? Would bandits attack a lone pair of soldiers? Bandits would attack an old granny leaning on her stick in hopes that they could sell her clothes and the stick for a couple of coppers. And the ones that'd be watching the road at this time of year would be even more desperate. What can we do then? He grinned slightly. Don't worry too much. I just wanted you to know that I won't guarantee anything. I think I can get us back to finish in one piece, though. I know the road pretty well, including the places bandits usually watch it. You're going to have to keep on practicing that sling every day, and the 2 of us are going to have to keep watch. One of us will have to be awake at every moment during the night. Are you ready for that? It didn't sound easy, but when she considered the alternatives, she said, Yes, I'm ready. All right, we'll spend a bit of time this afternoon getting supplies together and leave in the morning. Morning? We have at least that long. Your father is going to have to get his people out looking, and they won't likely be able to even spot us tonight. Even if they do, they have to report back to him, And then he has to decide just how he's going to try and deal with the situation. So we have at least that long. But I don't suppose we dawdle. She shook her head, had hardly thought of the fact that he winters in Mothakwan. And when I did think of it, I just decided he wouldn't want to see me anyway, so it didn't matter. He shrugged. What's done is done. Let's just worry about things as they are. So you have some important news for me, do you, merchant? Has your daughter come home again, then? Not exactly, lord. Gattersby frowned, and the merchant hurried on. But she's here in the city. I saw her in the marketplace the other day. And you waited until now to inform me? It wasn't quite like that at all, lord. I was making efforts through my own resources to track her down and find where she was staying. By today having little success, I thought it better that you know about the situation. I see, he said, dragging the words out. And he did see, quite well. The merchant had hoped to track his daughter down and deliver her for a great reward. After a few days, when he'd had little success, he thought it best to report in. If it were discovered that he had told no one she was in the city, there might be trouble for him. Besides that, there was the possibility of a reward for the information. He made a sign to one of his servants, who approached quickly and leaned down for orders. Fetch and well, do. I will want him to talk with this man. He turned back to the merchant. You have my thanks for coming in. If you will explain to my assistant what your agents have found, my men will take over the search from here, and you will be paid for your trouble. He was tempted to pay the man with a dagger under the ribs for his tardiness, but if he did so and it got out, he might have difficulty the next time he went looking for any sort of information. Kamatran and Derizhua made their way up to the road to finish. It was rainy and wet and generally uncomfortable, but Derizhua, did not allow herself to complain. About midday on the fourth day out, they came to a section where the road followed through a gorge. Kamatran signaled for a stop, then got down. You get down too. Walk around a bit. I have a feeling there may be an ambush up ahead. Don't start staring at any cliff sides. That'll let them know we suspect they're there. You tie the horses. I'll go around for a bit. And don't make yourself look at the cliffside, because that'll warn them as well as staring up there. He tossed her the reins of his horse and went off into the brush, acting like a man going off to relieve himself. She fastened the horse's reins to the couple of bushes, then wandered idly around the area. She took out her sling and slung several stones out into the river, then looked around, seemingly without curiosity. There was a sudden squawk, and a man came rolling down the cliffside like a bundle of rags. Well, there was no sense in pretending any more. She put a lead ball into her sling, and just in case, began swinging it around at her side. There was a movement on the cliffside as a ragged man with a javelin in his hand stood up, looking around behind him. Hardly thinking, she whirled the sling twice around her head and let go. The lead ball hit a rock beside the man with a loud crack. Where it went after that, she didn't know, but the man turned up again as he was turning, and as he was turning, Kamitran leaped up, and cut him down with a sword. He picked his way carefully down the cliffside, then walked over to her. Thanks for the help. I must have made some kind of noise coming up on the one just before him, and he had time to get up. So when he fell, I wasn't able to keep him from going all the way down. He just took that fellow's attention long enough that I could get to him. But how did you know that anyone was up there in the first place? The back of my neck was itching. The back of your neck was itching? He shrugged a little flustered. It happens from time to time. The back of my neck itches, and I know there's trouble ahead. I've run into trouble without a warning a time or two, but I've learned that the back of my neck's never a false warning. In this case, we were just going into the gorge. So what kind of trouble would be most likely? So I snuck up there and to look around, and there we were. Dun dun dun. There we go. So that was that chapter 6. Thank you, everybody who tuned in late for me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your patience. Tomorrow, I hope to be back on schedule. Should be, probably. Still a little bit low energy. That'll probably be for like I said, next couple of weeks. So for the story, it'll be low energy, doing what I can. But yeah, tune in tomorrow and find out what happens next time. So thank you, everybody. Good night.